Kale stood before the great window of the Eternal Witness and watched the stars. He had watched them for 3,000 years. In that time, he had seen empires rise and fall. He had seen species discover fire and then burn themselves to ash. He had recorded it all with steady hands and a quiet heart. The lion were observers. They did not fight. They did not trade. They did not interfere. They only watched and remembered. Kale was very good at his job. Today, he was watching humanity die that the Kethral Dominion had announced their intention to destroy the human colony on Varro 7. This was not unusual. The Kethral had destroyed 63 species before this. They were tall, covered in hard shell-like skin, and they enjoyed war the way some species enjoyed music. They had never lost. Humanity was young. They had only been among the stars for 500 years. Their ships were old. Their weapons were weak. Their numbers were small. Kale had reviewed their file that morning. There was nothing special about them. He expected this to be a quick observation. Perhaps 2 hours of recording. Then he would file the report and move on to the next dying species. The Kethral fleet arrived first. 400 warships dropped out of fold space above Varro 7. They were massive, dark things covered in spikes and weapons. Their commander, a creature named Veth, broadcast a simple message to the planet below. You have 1 rotation to surrender. After that, we will kill everything that moves. Kale began his recording. He noted the time, the fleet composition, the estimated civilian population on the planet. 2.3 million humans lived on Varro 7, farmers mostly. Some miners, a few small cities. Nothing that could fight back against 400 warships. He waited for the surrender. It was the logical choice. Other species had surrendered to the Kethral before. Some had even been allowed to live as slaves. It was better than death, but the surrender did not come. Instead, something else happened. A signal burst from the planet's surface. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every language the translators could recognize. Kale's equipment picked it up instantly. 2 words. Just 2 words. We're coming. Kale checked his equipment. Perhaps there was an error. Perhaps he had misheard. No species responded to the Kethral like this. It was suicide. It was madness. Then the fold space signatures appeared. 47 human ships emerged from nothing. They were small compared to the Kethral vessels. Their hulls were scratched and dented. Some of them looked like they had been in battles before and never fully repaired. They arranged themselves between the Kethral fleet and a planet below. 40-7, ships against 400. Kale felt something stir in his chest. He did not recognize it at first. It had been so long since he felt anything while observing. Then he understood. It was curiosity. Commander Veth seemed amused. His response came quickly. You are outnumbered. Your ships are inferior. Your defeat is certain. Why do you not run? The human response came from the lead ship, a vessel called the Defiance. The voice belonged to a woman. She spoke calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. There are 2.3 million people on that planet. They cannot run. They cannot fight. So we will stand here, and you will have to go through us to reach them. Veth laughed. At least, Kale assumed it was a laugh. The Kethral made a grinding sound that usually meant amusement. Then you will die, Veth said. Maybe, the woman replied. But we will not die quietly. Kale enlarged the human fleet on his viewing screen. He could see the ships more clearly now. They were holding formation, not moving, not running. He zoomed in on the lead vessel and saw movement behind the windows of the bridge. Humans. Small, soft creatures with no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They lived short lives compared to most species. They were fragile. They broke easily. and yet they were not running. Cale opened a new file in his recording system. He had intended to title it Extinction of Sol 3 Colony Species, but something made him pause. He left the title blank for now. He had observed 1,247 battles in his long life. He had seen bravery and cowardice, victory and defeat. He had seen species fight and species surrender. He thought he had seen everything, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans were afraid. He could detect elevated heart rates through his sensors. Their stress hormones were flooding their systems. Every biological indicator said they were terrified, and not one ship turned away. Cale sat down slowly in his observation chair. He adjusted his recording equipment to capture everything. He had a feeling that this was going to be different from his other observations. He did not know why he felt this way. The numbers were clear. 47 against 400. Old ships against new. A young species against a proven war machine. But something in the way that woman had spoken made Cale pay attention. Something in the way those ships held their ground made him lean forward in his chair. The Cathedral began to move. 400 warships started their approach toward the planet. The human fleet did not retreat. They powered up their weapons, weak as they were, and prepared to fight. Cale whispered to himself, a habit he had developed over the centuries. "What are you doing? Why are you not running?" The woman on the Defiance spoke again. This time, her message was only for her fleet. "Today we show them what humans are made of. Today we give them a reason to remember our name." Cale began to record. Captain Una stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at her crew. They were young, most of them. Fresh faces that had joined the fleet looking for adventure and found war instead. Now they sat at their stations, hands steady on controls, eyes fixed on screens that showed 400 enemy ships coming toward them. She had commanded this ship for 11 years. She knew every sound it made, every shake and rattle when the engines fired. She knew her crew too. She knew their names, their families, their dreams. She knew that most of them would not survive the next few hours, but she did not tell them that her first officer, Junho, stood beside her. He was older, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands from battles long past. He looked at her with calm eyes. "The fleet is in position," he said, "awaiting your orders." Una nodded. She pressed the button that would broadcast her voice to all 47 ships. For a moment, she did not know what to say. What words could she offer to people about to die? Then she thought of the planet behind them. She thought of the farmers and the children and the teachers who had no ships, no weapons, no way to escape. She found her words. "I will not lie to you," she said. "You can see the numbers as well as I can. We are outmatched. We are outgunned. By every measure that matters, we should not be here." She paused. On the screens around her, she could see faces from other ships. Pilots in their cockpits, Marines in their armor, engineers in their engine rooms, all of them listening. But we are here, and there is a reason for that. Behind us, there are 2.3 million people who cannot fight for themselves. Mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. They are counting on us to give them a chance. Una felt her voice grow stronger. "We may not win today, but we will make them pay for every kilometer they advance. We will make them remember that humanity does not go quietly. We will give those people time. And if that is all we can give them, then that is enough." She ended the broadcast. The bridge was silent. Lieutenant Tai Wu, the youngest officer on the ship, turned from his station. His face was pale, and Una could see his hands shaking slightly. He was 23 years old. He had joined the fleet because his father had been a pilot. He had never seen real combat before today. "Captain," he said quietly, "I am afraid." Some commanders would have told him to be strong. Some would have told him to hide his fear. Una didn't either. "Good," she said. "Fear means you understand what is happening. Only fools feel nothing before battle. Then how do you fight?" Taiwu asked. "How do you move forward when you are terrified?" Una walked to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You decide that something matters more than your fear. You look at what you are protecting, and you choose. Fear is not your enemy, Taiwu. Fear is just a feeling. What you do with it is what makes you who you are." Taiwu nodded slowly. The shaking in his hands grew still. Far above the fleet, on the observation station, Kale was detecting something strange. The human ships had begun broadcasting signals. At first, he thought it was military communication. Then his translators decoded it. Music. The humans were playing music. It was loud, thundering sound. Drums beating in ancient rhythms. Voices raised in languages that have been dead for 1,000 years. Songs of war and loss and defiance. Songs that had been sung by humans when they fought with swords. Songs that had survived the journey to the stars. Kale had never seen anything like it. Commander Veth contacted him directly. The Kethral's voice was sharp with confusion. "Observer, what are they doing? Why are they making this noise?" Kale considered the question. He searched his vast archives for similar behavior. He found references to ancient human battles, to warriors who sang before they fought, to traditions older than space travel. "I believe," Kale said slowly, "they are preparing themselves. This is how humans ready themselves for combat. By making noise? By remembering who they are." Veth made the grinding sound again, but this time it did not sound like amusement. It sounded like something else. Perhaps uncertainty. On the Defiance, Una watched her crew. They were listening to the music too. She saw something change in their faces. The fear was still there, but something else joined it. Something harder. Something older. Pride. Determination. The stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. Junho moved to stand beside her. "The fleet is ready," he said. "All ships report prepared for battle." Una looked at the Kethral armada on her screen. 400 ships. Millions of tons of metal and weapons and death. Coming for her people. "All ships," she said into the communication system, "form the broken arrow." The fleet began to move. 47 ships arranged themselves into a formation that was older than space travel. A spear point aimed directly at the heart of the enemy fleet. Not a defensive position. Not a cautious approach. An attack formation. On his station, Kale watched with growing fascination. Every tactical database he had access to said this was wrong. A smaller force should spread out, should use speed and mobility to survive. They should not group together. They should not charge. But the humans were not following the databases. The music reached its peak. Then it fell silent. For one long moment, everything was quiet. The human fleet hung in space, ready, waiting. Yu and it spoke one final word. Forward. 47. Ships fired their engines at full power and accelerated. Directly toward 400 enemy warships. Kale's recording equipment hummed as it captured everything. The battle for Varu 7 had begun. Kale had recorded 1,247 space battles in his lifetime. He had seen fleets clash above dying worlds. He had watched civilizations burn. He thought he understood war. He was wrong. The humans did not fight like any species in his archives. They did not circle. They did not probe for weakness. They did not look for safe angles of attack. They charged straight into the heart of the Kethral formation. The first minutes were terrible. 12 human ships died in balls of fire and twisted metal. Kale watched the numbers fall on his screen. 47 became 35. Thousands of lives gone in heartbeats. But the humans did not scatter. The surviving ships closed the gaps left by the dead. They tightened their formation and kept going. Their weapons were weaker than the Kethrol guns, but they fired without stopping. Every shot aimed at engines, at weapon systems, at anything that would slow the enemy down. A human destroyer, its engines failing and hull burning, used its last momentum to fly directly into a Kethrol carrier. The collision destroyed both ships. The destroyer crew had no chance of survival. They did it anyway. Kale found himself leaning forward in his chair. His hands were gripping the armrests. He did not remember moving. On the Defiance, Una commanded her fleet with a calm voice that did not match the chaos around her. Her ship shook with every impact. Warning lights flashed across every console. But she did not panic. Group 3. Target that battleship's engines. Group 2. Cover their approach. All ships, watch for openings. Beside her, Junho was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. A console had exploded near him. He did not seem to notice. "We have broken through their outer line," he reported. "We are in their formation." Una smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Good. Now let us show them what close combat looks like." Deep in the Kethrol fleet, boarding pods were launching from human ships. Small metal containers filled with soldiers in heavy armor, flying through the chaos of battle to attach themselves to enemy vessels. Sergeant Hannah led one of these teams. She was 34 years old. She had been a Marine for 12 years. She had fought in 6 boarding actions before today. None of them had been against the Kethrol. Her pod hit the side of a Kethrol cruiser with a sound like thunder. The cutting charges fired, burning a hole through the enemy hull. Hannah was the first one through, her rifle already firing. The Kethrol were waiting for them. They were massive creatures, nearly 3 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in hard shell that could stop most weapons. Their arms ended in claws that could tear through armor like paper. They screamed as they charged, a sound that made human ears hurt. 5 of Hana's soldiers died in the first 10 seconds, but the rest kept fighting. Hana shot one Kethrol in the eye, the only soft spot on their face. She ducked under the claws of another and fired into its joints. When her rifle ran out of ammunition, she drew her pistol. When that was empty, she picked up a broken piece of metal from the floor and kept fighting. The Kethrol had never faced anything like this. Other species they had conquered fought until they realized they were losing, then surrendered or ran. The humans did neither. They fought like animals, like the battle would never end. Like surrender was a word they had never learned. Hana lost track of time. The corridor was filled with smoke and blood and the sounds of violence. She felt something break in her arm, but did not stop to check what. There was no time. She found herself standing over a fallen Kethrol, breathing hard, surrounded by the bodies of enemies and friends alike. She had 4 soldiers left from the 20 she had started with. "Sergeant," one of them said, "we have reached the engine room." Hannah nodded. Her voice was rough when she spoke. "Plant the charges. We are ending this ship." In space outside, Kale was watching something he could not explain. The human fleet had lost 22 ships now. They should have retreated. Any logical species would have recognized defeat and tried to escape. The humans pressed forward. A bronze fighter pilot named Dowan flew his small craft through a storm of enemy fire. His wingmates were dead. His ship was damaged. A piece of shrapnel had cut his leg badly, and blood was pooling on the floor of his cockpit. He could see the Kethrol command ship ahead of him, a massive vessel covered in communication antennas. If those antennas fell, the enemy fleet would lose coordination. Dowan knew his ship could not survive another minute. He made a choice. He pushed his engines to maximum and flew directly toward the antennas. The Kethrol fired everything they had at him. His shields failed. His hull began to break apart around him. In his final moment, Doan thought of his mother. She had told him once that brave people are not people without fear. Brave people are people who are afraid, but do what must be done anyway. His ship hit the communication array at full speed. The explosion destroyed the antennas and damaged the command ship badly. Commander Vef lost contact with half his fleet. On the observation station, Kale was adding notes to his archive. Notes he had never added to any battle before. "They are not winning," he wrote. "By every measure, they are losing. But they are not breaking. They absorb losses that would shatter other species and continue fighting. I do not understand this. I do not understand them." He paused in his writing. The Kethral fleet was in chaos. Ships were burning on both sides. The humans had lost half their force, but they had taken nearly a quarter of the enemy with them, and they were still fighting. Kale added one more note. "For the first time in 3,000 years, I do not know how this will end." 12 hours had passed since the battle began. The human fleet was dying. 47 ships had become 19. Thousands of sailors were gone, their bodies floating in the cold space between the stars. The Defiance was burning in 3 places, and half of its crew was dead, but the Kethral had lost 97 ships. On the bridge of the Defiance, Una stood among the wreckage of her command center. Smoke filled the air. Sparks fell from broken wires above her head. The main screen was cracked but still working, showing the chaos of battle outside. Junho lay beside her chair. A piece of metal had gone through his chest when the last missile hit. He was still alive, but Una could see the truth in his eyes. He did not have long. She knelt beside him and took his hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have found another way." Junho shook his head slowly. Blood stained his lips when he spoke. There was no other way. "You know this. We all knew this when we came here." "It is not enough," Una said. "We have hurt them, but they still have 300 ships. We cannot stop them all." Junho squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. "Then make it mean something," he said. "Make them remember. Make them afraid to ever come back." His eyes closed. His hand went still. Una stayed beside him for a moment. She let herself feel the loss, the grief, the weight of all the deaths that had happened and all the deaths still to come. Then she stood up. Her face was hard when she turned to her remaining crew. Status report. Lieutenant Taiwu was still at his station. His uniform was torn and burned, but he was alive. His hands were no longer shaking. 19 ships remaining, he said. The Kethral have stopped their advance. They are regrouping. Una looked at the screen. The enemy fleet was indeed holding position. They had expected this to be easy. They had expected the humans to break and run. Instead, they had lost a quarter of their force to a fleet 1/10 their size. "There is a troop transport in our rear formation," Una said. "The Horizon. It carries 5,000 ground troops. If we can get them to the surface, they can help defend the colony." Taiwu checked his readings. "The Kethral will never let the transport through. Their remaining ships are between us and the planet." Una nodded. She had known this already. "Then we will make a path." On the surface of Varro 7, Dr. Mira worked in a shelter buried deep underground. The shelter was filled with refugees from the cities above. Mothers holding children. Old people sitting in silence. Everyone looking up at the ceiling as if they could see through the rock to the battle in the sky. Mira was a doctor. She had trained to save lives. Today, all she could do was wait. A young boy sat near her. His name was Jiwan, and he was 8 years old. His parents had put him on an evacuation shuttle, but the shuttle had been turned back when the battle started. Now he was alone. "Are we going to die?" he asked Myra. She looked at him. In her mind, she saw the numbers. 400 enemy ships. A small fleet of defenders. A planet with no military, no weapons, no way to fight back. I do not know, she said honestly. But there are people fighting for us right now. People who flew all this way just to protect us. Why? Ji-Wan asked. They do not know us. Mira thought about the question. Why would people fly into certain death for strangers? Because that is what humans do, she finally said. We protect each other. Even when it is hard. Even when it hurts. It is who we are. In space, the final phase of the battle began. The 19 surviving human ships formed a tight formation around the transport vessel horizon. Every ship put itself between the transport and the enemy fleet. The Defiance took the lead position, the most dangerous spot, the place where the heaviest fire would fall. Yuna opened a channel to all ships. We are going to push straight through their center. Every ship protects the horizon. If you are hit, you stay in formation as long as you can. Do not stop for anything. There was a pause. Then, one by one, the captains of the other ships responded. Understood. For Varos. See you on the other side, Captain. The formation began to move. The Kethrol opened fire immediately. Missiles and energy beams filled the space around the human ships. The first vessel to fall was a small frigate on the outer edge. It exploded silently in the vacuum dot, but the formation held. Yuna watched ships die around her. Each death opened a gap that another ship moved to fill. The horizon stayed in the center, untouched, while its protectors burned. The Defiance took hit after hit. Systems failed across the ship. The hull began to crack. Yuna felt blood running down her face from a wound she did not remember getting. Captain, Taiwu said. We are through the main line. The horizon has a clear path to the planet. Yuna looked at the screen. He was right. The transport was accelerating toward Varro 7. The Kethrol were too damaged and too scattered to stop it. 5,000 soldiers would reach the surface. The colony would have a chance to fight back. Yuna pressed the communication button one last time. Her voice was weak but steady. To whoever finds this message, we were afraid. We were always afraid. We just did not let it stop us. Tell our families we love them. Tell the galaxy that humanity stands. The Defiance took one final hit. The ship broke apart around her. But as darkness took her, Yuna saw the horizon entering the atmosphere of VAROS-7. They had done it. 3 days after the battle, Kale came down from his station. In 3,000 years. He had never left the Eternal Witness during an observation. The Lion did not interfere. They did not get involved. They watched from above and recorded what they saw. But something had changed in Kale. Something had broken open inside him during those 12 hours of battle. He needed to understand. He needed to see the humans up close. The surface of Varro 7 was scarred by combat. The Kethrol had landed ground forces after the space battle, trying to finish what their fleet had started. They had been met by 5,000 human soldiers from the horizon, and every civilian who could hold a weapon. The fighting had lasted 2 more days. Then the Kethrol had retreated. For the first time in their history, the Kethrol Dominion had lost a war. Kale walked through the ruins of the main city. Buildings were broken. Streets were filled with debris. But everywhere he looked, he saw humans working. They were clearing rubble. They were treating wounded. They were rebuilding. They had just survived near extinction, and they were already thinking about tomorrow. He found a memorial being built near the center of the city. Workers were placing stones in a long wall. Each stone had a name carved into it. The names of the dead. Over 12,000 of them. A woman stood before the unfinished wall. She was leaning on a metal cane, and bandages covered half of her face. Burns, Kale realized. Severe burns. He recognized her voice when she spoke. You are the observer, Captain Yuna said. She did not turn to look at him. Her eyes stayed on the names. I wondered if you would come down. Kale moved to stand beside her. He looked at the wall, at the endless list of names. You survived, he said. The report said the Defiance was destroyed. It was. A rescue team pulled me from the wreckage. They said I was dead for 3 minutes before they brought me back. She touched the bandages on her face. I lost some things, but I am still here. They stood in silence for a moment. The sounds of construction filled the air around them. Life continuing despite everything. I have a question, Kale finally said. I have watched many battles. I have seen many species fight and die. But I have never seen anything like what your people did here. Yuna looked at him now. Her one visible eye was dark and tired, but there was strength in it. Ask your question. Why did you not run? Kale said. Your ships were weaker. Your numbers were smaller. Every calculation said you would lose. Why did you throw yourselves at an enemy you could not defeat? Yuna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Do you see these names? She pointed at the wall. These were teachers and engineers and pilots. They had families. They had dreams. They were afraid, every single one of them. I felt their fear through the communication channels. I heard it in their voices. She turned to face the city around them. The broken buildings. The people working to repair them. But they also saw what was behind them. Millions of people who could not fight. Children who had never hurt anyone. Families just trying to live their lives. And my people decided that protecting those lives was worth more than their own fear. Kale processed her words. He searched his archives for similar examples. He found very few. Other species would have calculated the odds and retreated, he said. They would have saved their fleet to fight another day. Yes, Yuna agreed. And they would have been logical. They would have been smart. They would have survived. She paused. But the people on this planet would have died. Logical choices do not always feel right in here. She touched her chest over her heart. Kale thought about this. He thought about 3,000 years of watching species make logical choices. He thought about all the civilizations that had calculated their odds and decided to surrender, to retreat, to let others die so they could live. And he thought about 47 ships flying into the face of 400. I believe I understand now, he said slowly. Other species fight to win. Humans fight because fighting is what must be done. Victory is preferred, but not required. Yuna smiled. It was a small, sad smile. Something like that. We call it different things. Duty, honor, love. But it all comes down to the same thing. There are people who need protecting. So we protect them. Even if it kills us. Kale nodded. He thought of all the reports he would have to write. All the archives he would have to update. The galaxy needed to know what he had learned here. I came to this planet expecting to record an extinction, he said. I was wrong. You have given me something far more interesting to write about. And what is that? Kale looked up at the sky, at the stars that had watched the battle, at the vast and dangerous universe beyond. A warning, he said, to every species that might think of attacking humanity. A record of what happens to those who threaten your people. He turned and began walking back toward his shuttle. But he stopped after a few steps and looked back at Yuna. The stars have shuddered before great empires, he said. They have shuddered before terrible weapons and vast armadas. But I think, from now on, they will shudder before something else as well. What is that? Yuna asked. Kale thought of the music he had heard before the battle. The ancient songs. The thundering drums. The voices raised in defiance against impossible odds. Hope, he said. The stars will shudder before human hope. Because hope does not calculate odds. Hope does not accept defeat. Hope fights until there is nothing left to fight with, and then it fights some more. He paused. That is terrifying. And I think the galaxy is only beginning to understand how terrifying it truly is. He walked away, leaving Una standing before the memorial wall. Behind her, the city was slowly coming back to life. Children were playing in cleared streets. People were laughing despite their wounds. Above them all, the stars watched Dodd, and somewhere in the darkness between them, the Kethral Dominion was learning to fear a species they had once dismissed as weak. The humans had survived, and the galaxy would never forget.